Okay? Some expectations and some assumptions that ultimately kill us. And I'm pretty sure everyone over here saw on social media that last week something very interesting happened. Okay, I'll give you as a clue. It's in the UK area specifically.
Brexit.
Say again.
Brexit.
All right. So we had last week we had the passing of Her Majesty. Okay, the Queen had passed away last week, and now you're thinking, yeah, Bruno, we're going to talk about this over here now this morning. Yes, we are going to quickly talk about it, because I think in every kind of context in life we can learn quite a couple of things, and I want to just give you guys just 7 things specifically that I think we can draw from the Queen's passing. Okay, and here we go. Are you guys ready? You guys are nodding your heads, right? Okay, so yeah, here we go. So a couple of things that we can learn from the Queen's passing. And this definitely applies to not just us inside this room, not just those inside of the Zoom room, but to every other person on this planet specifically. We can learn from this. Number one thing that we can learn from the Queen's passing is that no matter who you are, death is inevitable. Doesn't matter whether you are rich, whether you are poor, whether you come from Britain, whether you come from, locally over here. Death is inevitable. It is something that is going to happen. All right? It is one thing that all of us inside this room essentially have got in common. The question is, now with the life that you still have, because we're not dead yet, so the life that you still have, what will you do with that particular life moving forward? And that's a key question. All right, next one over here is, you can transform the world for the better, and yet people still have something bad to say about you. Yep. You can transform the world for the better, and someone still has something bad to say about you, because according to them, you didn't match up to what their particular standards, opinions, or thoughts about you are. So what's the conclusion? The conclusion is, therefore, live for God and run your race. I was so fascinated, like you hop onto social media, I see a mentor of mine shared something so powerful about the Queen from a biblical point of view, and then scroll down a bit more on the other side of social media, people claiming that she's a reptilian, that she was a part of child slavery and all these things. So you're thinking, jette broer, have you ever sat down and spoken to the Queen face to face? If not, then you can't make claims like that. You know what I'm saying? But again, you can transform the world for the better, and someone still has something bad to say about you. I mean, look at Jesus. All he did was heal people, restore people, make people, and yet they crucified him. All right? So on that note, something fascinating. I want you to think about this particular thought. If you've ever been betrayed by someone, just consider this. And I think all of us have that in common inside this room. Okay? If I had to ask, by show of hands, how many of you have been who's ever been betrayed by someone? I think all of our hands will go up at some point, right? Because it's part of the game, right? But here's a thought. Think about it. If it were not for Judas, Jesus would not have gone to the cross, which would mean we'd all be stuffed. Old Testament, if it were not for Saul, who persecuted King David, who persecuted David at the time before he became king, all right? David would not have half the character he had when he stepped into his kingship. So you need betrayal in your life because it cultivates something on the inside of you. But your response to that will ultimately determine whether you roll over or whether you rise up. One thing I want to encourage you guys to do, that when a crisis strikes, when something tough, adversity hits you, all right, one of the first things you want to try and do by the grace of God is to make sure that you get all the excuses out the way quickly. Remove the blame quickly. Get that out the way entirely and assume the role, not of a victim, but assume the role of taking responsibility. Okay? Thinking, okay, what can we learn from this? What can we draw from this moving forward so that we can address the matter at hand? Because if we're going to go into the whole thing of assuming the role of a victim, which is a lot of the times what tends to happen in a crisis. I know because I've done that too before in my life. When a crisis hits, you want to initially assume the role of becoming defensive or like, why this, why this? Why did you do that to me? Instead of taking the plank out of your own eye first so that you can judge the other moving forward, right? Jesus talks about that very nicely in Matthew chapter 7. He says these particular words. He says, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust, which is like a small speck, right? Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? All right. How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. All right. So taking complete ownership and responsibility when something does hit, to see, okay, cool. Okay. How can I get the plank out of my own eye so that we can address the matter at hand in order to move forward effectively? Okay, so one of the first things you want to do when a crisis strikes is to essentially get all the excuses out the way. Like on my phone, I've got this really powerful picture of this guy kind of like he's racing in the Tour de France somewhere. So like that kind of cycling, like with the helmet, you know, where they sit like this, not like this, right? And they're busy cycling. This guy's cycling, but the only difference is this guy he only has one arm and one leg. And like the caption over there reads, no more excuses.